Gogi. Learn those tools, real lessons to live by.
So I'm not sure how much of our really wonderful conversation we got on videotape, but we did push the record button now. So we're going to get back to our conversation,
Awesome.
specifically preparing for release from prison or preparing from release from an old mentality, an old social structure, an old group, a gang, preparing for release from family dramas, a bad relationship. As we
Yeah.
prepare for release, specifically the tools of choice, how you
Yeah.
use them, how you have used them in the past, how you will use them in the future, how you're using them today. So
Right.
if there's a person and they are sitting there with a tablet in a prison and they are doing this course that we're going to create about this called Release Prep, the Gogi Way, with Coach Andy, what are they going to learn? What are they going to learn in this time together?
If I can emphasize, be very concerned on how you view you. I'm very concerned on how I view Andy, just like you're very concerned on how you view Coach Taylor. I'm very concerned on how I view Coach Andy as well. And I make sure that that viewpoint stays aligned with my morals and my values by the power of choice when I think and when I speak and when I move. And I mean that because there's going to be a lot of social pressure and there's going to be so much stuff that you've been in navigating through prison, and you're going to take a reality check. There's 10, there's 2, I mean, but you still move forward, and no matter what, everything is positive because you're always learning from it. If you can instill that in your mind, that is going to be something that's going to benefit you so much, because it's benefited me so much. But when you're very concerned on how you view yourself, that view from other people means nothing,
So,
because you
a CEO can say, "Oh gosh, you're just such a loudmouth." You don't need to say, "I'm a loudmouth." You can see yourself as, "I'm a good leader. My voice, people want to hear what I have to say." So you
absolutely.
can take any perspective that they are giving and change it to a positive. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely. When you take enough time to sit there and really look at yourself with an honest heart, and maybe you have a support system around you that you build in your Gogi group, in a recovery meeting, at church, or just on the yard, wherever you're at, and you ask. So there's someone who's important to me, maybe a correctional officer I admire, maybe it's a nurse I admire, or maybe it's a cellmate that I admire who says that I am a loudmouth. How do you feel about that? Because I really want to know. I'm really concerned about how I view myself, because now I feel like I'm a loudmouth. And if you get an honest input that, sometimes you can be overbearing, but your intentions are good. So maybe you should dial back when you are loud.
Uh-huh.
So
So
that,
not taking it personally like a punishment, but
no,
information with which you can maybe adjust some things.
is it powerful? Is it positive? Is it productive? When you filter your questions through the 3 Ps, then you start to understand, like, okay, I can take an honest look at myself. I am an adult and I am in custody and I am here to work on myself. And so when I understand that, then you start to see the whole world just becomes this beautiful blossom of wonderfulness and teaching, because I don't know anybody who doesn't want to be better.
Uh-huh.
Just like you and I don't know anybody who wants to stay in the same old mentality or stuck in the same toxic behaviors or in the same toxic relationships, even if that's how they were raised, that's all they know, that was their nurture, not their nature. I mean, nobody wants to stay that way because it doesn't feel good. So you have to remember that, there are some opinions that you should listen to, but not every opinion, because someone may say, oh, you're loud and over boisterous because they're envious of you, or just because you're clapping at a football game. That's time and situation. I
Right.
mean,
Right.
and so, and you can filter that, and you just remember this week's tool. Okay, I can belly breathe. This is not something that's going to ruin my day, not something I'm going to go to the hole for or get a bunk right up for. I'm gonna, I'm gonna filter this. Is this something that is worth my time to look at? Because a lot of what it is hurt people hurting people. But
Mm.
there are those people who have your best intention in mind and say, hey, look, you can be overbearing, or you're a great leader, you're very outspoken and everybody loves what you have to say. So it goes both ways. But when you filter, is it powerful? Is it positive? Is it productive? And you have that choice because you do. It's not something that's foreign. It's right here, right now, like as I squeeze my hand. Then you start to move forward in your smart part of your mind and using your brain that way.
Now, here's a question for you. Some of the individuals that tune into this video on YouTube or watch a clip of it on TikTok, or TikTok's back up again, it was down for a minute, or
Yeah.
Instagram, or if they're on a tablet doing this course. Can you describe for them what are the Gogi life tools that are called the tools of choice? What are they, and how would you describe them?
So it all starts in the mind. You know, positive thoughts. And then your thoughts translate into your words, and then positive words. And then the third tool of choice is positive actions. And we filter that with the keywords. Is it powerful? Is it positive? Is it productive? I always add this. And if it's not, then I get to a choice that is. And usually one of those choices is my 5-second light switch. And that choice is me forgiving getting the distance to forgive. But not to go too far on that. I mean, what you think about is what you speak about. And what you think about is how you act. And when you speak and you act and you move that way, you can really start to analyze yourself. Is this powerful? Is this positive? Is this productive? If not, reevaluate what you got going on and you can get that way.
I think it's interesting because I could have a negative thought, but I don't need to let it get to the words. And if it doesn't
Right.
get to the words, it's never going to get to an action. But if I have a negative thought and it gets to a negative word, it's more likely to get to that negative action. It's almost like there's 3 steps before I do something that's really stupid.
Yeah.
I've got to think about it. I've got to talk about it, even if it's just internal talk, and then I've got to do it. So, how do the tools of choice work now that you're a free man? How does it work for you in navigating this world with all the social media, with the jobs, the people, the different, nobody's following any rules. It's just hard to make some sense out of it. How do you
Yeah.
do that?
So I just had an experience today at work. I actually have a coworker who him and I were incarcerated together. And so he's going through it, and it's just a situation that's outside of work, which is none of my concern, beyond my control at all. I had a coworker start to vent to me about this, and I said, I had a because so I started thinking about this. I'm like, man, is this really powerful, positive, or productive? And how am I going to navigate?
Engaging in the conversation? What?
Well, I mean, so he started, because this third party started talking to me about another coworker who I was actually incarcerated with, which is a blessing. We're both working and we work a
Yes.
wonderful job. And so I started asking myself the tools of choice. Is this powerful? Is this positive? Is this productive? Because I asked him before he went any further, he said about 6 or 7 words, and I said, hold on. Did you talk to so and so about this before you're talking to me about this? And he said, no. I said, okay, I don't really feel comfortable talking to you about this unless he's here because I really like this individual and I don't want there to be any sort of stuff. And I'm going to be honest with you, man, like what he's got going on outside of where we work is really none of my business unless he wants to talk to me about it. And
Interesting.
that,
What I think you did was you had a thought, somebody's engaging you. You had
yeah,
a thought, wow, is this working for me or not? Then you,
right,
instead of engaging in negative words, you
right.
changed to positive words and you stopped the potential for positive actions.
Stop the potential for positive actions.
Yeah, by having the positive words, there's no negative outcome.
Right. Okay. Then having any
No,
negative actions. Okay.
no
Yeah.
negative outcome is possible because you've engaged in, hey, I don't really feel comfortable with that.
Right.
So what could have been an ugly situation with a lot of rumors and bad talking, you simply
Right.
didn't engage. You just,
Right.
you had the thought, he engaged you in conversation, and then your words, you chose them to be positive. So therefore, that third component of a negative action couldn't exist. You evaporated it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So cool.
And and this is something that I've seen transpire in prison multiple times, because I did 5 years and 10 months, and I know that a lot of people have done more time than me, and I'm not trying to say that I did a lot of time or anything like that, but I did a majority of my time in a dorm. I did over 4 years in a dorm. And so like you can literally see like something happen here, and then someone talk about it there, and then another person talk about it there, and then there, and then it'll get back to where you're sitting at, and then you hear a completely, it's a telephone. So I've seen that, and I've actually had this happen to me where I've done something, and then it comes back to me like 35 minutes later that it was not even that, and I'm just like, so in saying that, that's something that I took. Not that I haven't didn't know this before prison, but it's something that I took because I've had it happen to me in a really negative, hurtful manner that was just like completely blown out of context. That was just like, it was extremely childish. And and I take things like that now. I'm like, man, prison really taught me a lot. And you know what? If it wasn't for Gogi, I wouldn't have not learned that I had the power of choice in my thoughts, in my words, and in my actions. And I can filter those choices with, is this powerful? Is this positive? Is this productive? If they're not, I'm getting to my 5-second light switch. And that first positive action for me is forgive. Am I safe enough away from harm for me to give?
Can you give me an example of when you were in prison? And I remember, I think the first time I met you was you were working at the barista coffee training.
The
Yep,
High Desert Cafe. Yes,
it
yes, yes.
was wonderful. You make the best cafe lattes ever. I'd go back to
Oh, thank you.
prison just for one of those. That was so
Oh,
good.
yeah.
So I think our first meeting, of course, we've been getting your letters, and this is your thesis project, and we have a big file on you, dude. We've got our own C file on you, but it's all of real good stuff. Um, can you think of another instance when you were in prison where you used the tools of choice to kind of redirect something that could have gone sideways?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So there was a time when my bunkie did not get along with a guy who moved in next to us. And I had known this guy from, because I was at Snake River Corrections minimum, and the medium is literally right across the street. So usually people come from the medium to the minimum. And my bunkie had done a lot of time, and so he knew a lot of different people from the inside. And I could just see this was just, I mean, I could just see, because my bunkie came to me. He's a really introverted person, and he said, "Hey, Andy," he's like, "I don't get along with this guy really well, and he's just hanging his feet over in our area. Can you talk to him for me, please? Because I'm gonna freak out." And I'm like, "Yeah, of course, I got you, not a problem." And so I actually ended up using, my tool of choice. Is this going to be a positive choice? I'm like, yeah, okay, yeah, why not? He's got his feet in our bunk area, and it's not a big deal. And so I actually was able to diffuse a situation between him and my bunkie, and come to find out, they had an understanding that happened like 6 or 7 years ago, that a misunderstanding that happened 6 or 7 years ago, that a handshake just got them through it, and then they became best of buds. They were spreading the next day, and they they played basketball and all this other stuff, and it was just over a simple thought, like, okay, is this going to be a powerful choice for me to just ask someone to move their feet politely out of our bunk area into their bunk area? And then, the words that, transpired after that was, "Hey, man, like, this is our bunk area, and I understand that you're new here. And it's not a big deal. It's just like, we both work 8-hour days. I get up at 3:30 in the morning, and, he works a longer shift than I do. And we just don't really want your stuff in our area, man. Can you just turn that other way?" And he said, "Oh my goodness, I do apologize about that. I did not know, since I'm new here." I'm like, "Yeah, if you look, all the bunks are facing this way, and we all kind of turn that way. And if you see, your area's over there. That's why the other guy who's sitting that way is on the opposite side." And he was like, "Oh, I didn't even know that." Just something, and it's just something so minimal, where I've seen in the past, using your powerful, positive, productive words, using your tools of choice, that people just boom, and they're instantly tight fisted, and they're chested up, and they're breathing heavy, over something that is just really, really childish and really silly. So, I mean, you can, once you start using these tools of choice, you start to develop vision and foresight into the future. Like, okay, if I just ask this gentleman politely, or if I just ask this correctional officer politely for some help, or this, this staff member, whatever it is, things are going to happen nicely. I mean, and usually in your favor.
I
I mean,
love
and
hearing that. I love hearing that because so often he's got his foot in our area. Somebody has to get big, puffed up, angry. They
yeah,
have to lay the law down. But it sounds to me like you just said, hey, you're new here. Welcome. Here's how we do things. All good. Big smile.
yeah,
Very different approach. And these two guys that had some misunderstanding of the past, they're able to get beyond it. So the
yeah.
tools of choice in that case not only allowed you to help your friend, but also kind of reunite two old friends that had a misunderstanding that they hadn't gotten beyond. That's
Yeah,
really cool.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and so that attitude right there, I had that attitude with me when I first showed up. I mean, when I, off the bus to prison, and that attitude where I've showed up at was not accepted very well. And so that's why I used my Gogi and I wrote, 30 pages on braving the bricks and how using, your tools of choice will give you the courage to be brave and
Right.
be vulnerable and stand alone and grow mentally, spiritually, and emotionally while not succumbing to the prison politics or a prisoner mentality and ultimately not being a victim of your own creation,
Mhm.
because you can definitely victimize yourself in there and pick up bad traits and leave with more bad traits than you came out in there with. I mean, because it can go both ways, and that choice is on you because only you are the boss of your brain. I
So,
mean, and
how do the tools of choice then prepare you? How is it a release preparation to utilize these tools? Okay, it may make the art a little less dramatic. It may make things like putting your feet in the wrong area a little less dramatic. But how is it preparing you for a release to exercise these tools every day? How is it doing that?
so currently, I mean, I'm trying to get a vehicle. I have my license, and like, and I just got my first full 2 week paycheck, and I'm like, wow, my chime account. I'm like, I haven't made this much money in a long time. I'm like, I shed a tear. I sent it to my mentor, and I was just like
That's so
excited.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm like, dude, I have money, and then like, so my mom automatically is like, look, save it. You need a car. But I'm like, okay. But then now I'm like, I'm looking around my room and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's all this stuff I need. And then I automatically remember, oh, are any of these things actual necessities in your life? And so I went back to, is this powerful? Is this positive? Is this productive? And that whole what that stemmed from, just imagine that this is like a car right here, and this is powerful, positive, productive. And then I had socks not needed,
Yeah.
shoes not needed, shirts not needed.
Yes. So you
So
remain
I mean,
focused on that car that you're going to get.
yeah, so
Love it.
absolutely. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and so that's a huge choice. But let's just take it even to something smaller. Like I'm in grocery outlet a couple days ago, and this guy is completely just cutting me off with his cart. I mean, he's on a mission. He just got off of work. We're both dirty, and like because I work in a warehouse and I'm working with car parts and stuff, and so I'm all dirty. And he cut me off, and I'm like, you know what? It's gonna be okay, because you know what? I mean, like, it's not a big deal. He must have needed something more than I did right there. And I mean, but right there in my mind, I stopped, and my first thought was, I am the boss of my brain. You know that I am the boss of my brain, and I hit a belly breathe. And then the next one, because you had asked me if I would speak about this, I'm like, man, is this powerful? Is this positive or is this productive to get frustrated at a complete stranger who's probably in a hurry and who probably has a wife and 3 kids and has been working 12-hour days? No, not at all. He must need to be there more than I do. So hey, right on, man. Good to see you.
Would you
So
say
in
that
that
your tools have changed your life now that you're out? Has it changed from when before you went in You made certain decisions. You operate a certain way. You're now out and you have your Gogi tools of choice. Is there a difference between the Andy before and the Andy after?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I and this is kind of embarrassing, but I used to work in solar before I was incarcerated. I worked in solar, and we worked 60-hour weeks. And so we're going out, we're going out to a site out from where I live in Salem. We're going out to Madras, and with a coworker and I, and we're parked at a Safeway, and I'm getting ready to get out, and this car just zooms and it gets too close, and I can't get the door open. And I'm surprised they didn't call the cops on me, because I opened the door just enough and I stuck my hand out the window and was swearing and cussing and freaking out. And she was like, "What are you doing, Andrew? Stop this, blah, blah, blah." And so I jump out the other side, and I'm getting ready to just explode. And as I get up to the car, I realize it's an elderly couple. And I'm like, "Oh my." And it's like 6 o'clock in the morning. And I sat there and I waited, and then I apologized to them, and I actually had frightened them. I felt so terrible because they were frightened because I was flipping out over them parking too close and not being able to. I mean, he couldn't get out either. So it was a complete accident. And that was 7 years ago. That was in 2018. So 6 years ago. That is now not something that is even in the forefront of my, even is something that is even remotely possible in my mind. If that were to happen, I would just sit there and wait. And that's because I have a different viewpoint, because I understand wholeheartedly that I'm the only one that's in control up here. I'm the boss of my brain. And I have my Gogi tool belt around my belt, around my head, around my shoulders. I mean, I have my Gogi, I have it everywhere, and I have the choice to think powerfully, positively, and productively, as well as speak and as well as act that way. And nobody else has control of that but me. And so just to think of, like, there are times that before my incarceration, that I mean, that were some really sour times that I'm not proud of. And I look back at that and I'm like, thank God for Coach Taylor and all those inmates from 2002 to 2007. Because, man, I definitely needed these tools way before I was incarcerated. And I'm so grateful that I have them now.
Yeah, I've never been a prisoner of from the legal perspective, but I certainly was an emotional prisoner. I was a far too
Yeah.
sensitive child and always felt like I was just very different from my family. I didn't feel heard. Walking into the prison, it looked like how I felt.
Yeah.
So when I first saw the prison, I saw the suffering and I felt the suffering. It really represented me. And I
Yeah.
wanted to be released from that suffering. And the most ironic thing happened. It was the prisoners that I chose to sit with who talked with me about these tools that are now the Gogi life tools. And I think that we all need to be released from a prison, whether it's a prison of a belief system, a perspective, an experience, trauma, or like my little feral cat needs needs to be released from this room because she's got the serious zoomies. She needs a release pretty quickly, poor thing. We all need to be released from various prisons. In your
Absolutely.
perspective, do the Gogi life tools of choice, allow anyone to find their way out of a perceived or literal prison?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's this, I'm a quotes person. I mean, I love to read inspirational books and different things. So, I mean, there's this quote that's by an unknown author. It's from a CrossFit book that a good friend of mine let me read. And it says, when you think you've been buried, you've actually been planted. And that's just, that's a paradigm shift, right? That's a perspective change in the tools of choice, because that
Say
starts
that
with your
again.
heart.
Say that again slower so our students and our viewers can really digest what you're saying.
So when you think you've been buried, you've actually been planted. And so when you shift your perspective, when you have a change in your reality, just by the power of choice of thinking, by the power of choosing how you think, then the world is limitless at that point. Because then you start to understand, this is what I touched on in the last video, that everything is a teaching or a reiteration furthering your mental, emotional, spiritual, habitual, and physical health. Because when you filter your choices, your words, and your thoughts and your actions through, is it powerful? Is it positive? Is it productive? That internal detainment, the mental refrainment that you have, it just breaks the chains, because you start stepping forward towards something that is sanity, that is freedom. And maybe you like the hecticness. Some people like hectic crazy. I liked controlled environments. I mean, I like a little bit of controlled chaos, but some people thrive in that's not, and maybe that's what they're looking for. But not to go too far off the subject, but to speak what you're saying, I do think and fully believe with everything in my being that the tools of choice do give you that power to choose, which way am I going? Am I going further into my emotional refrainment and my internal detainment, or am I stepping out of it?
Mhm. Well, my cat is definitely, she's so not using her tools of choice.
Or maybe she's having the most fun. We don't know.
She certainly is. So I think our student who has watched this, or whoever might have watched it on YouTube or any of the other mediums that we're going to put this on, might realize that they have tools with which to start carving out their future, a release from the prison, mental, emotional, even financial, all of those prisons that contain us, that we think we have no power over. Through the tools of choice, we certainly do. Would you agree with that, Coach Andy?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I couldn't agree with it anymore. That was well spoke.
Any last words for our viewers?
I, I'm trying to think about it. Choose something powerful and productive and positive today. I mean, even if it's just one thing, just choose that one thing and do it. And not only do it, be proud of doing it and be grateful that you got to do it, because, some people don't know that they have the choice. And now that you know that you have the choice, you can never not know. It's like once you find out when you're a little kid that the burner's hot when it's red and you touch it once, you don't ever touch it again, right? So I mean, it's the same thing, right? Once you find out that you get to think powerfully, positively, and productively, hmm, why wouldn't you?
Game on, right?
Right? Exactly. Why wouldn't you?
I love it. All right. So, to all of our students, stand by for more wonderful conversations with Coach Andy and other coaches as we prepare you for release from any prison that you may be experiencing. Thank you, everybody.
See you later.
Thank you, Coach.
G-O-D-I, G-O-D-I. Gogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. G-O-D-I, G-O-D-I. Gogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. G-O-D-I, G-O-D-I. Gogi told me this, I got the tools to live by. G-O-D-I, G-O-D-I. Gogi told me this, I got the tools